Hello friends, this is Growl. In this video, I'm going to go over exactly how you should be playing Discipline Priest in Raid, specifically with the Spirit Shell build. People often come to me asking for help with raid stuff, saying they're just too far behind the other healers in their raid. When I look at their logs, it becomes clear very quickly that they don't actually understand how they should be playing Disc Priest. This video is going to be a quick, helpful guide to Spirit Shell Disc Priest in Shadowlands. If you haven't seen it already, I have another general purpose raid video where I go over learning all other classes in raid. I'll leave a link in the description and be sure to subscribe to my channel for more informative WoW content. Let's get started. Before we talk about setup, I want to give a quick summary of what Spirit Shell Disc Priest actually is. Your goal is to apply atonements to as many players as possible in the raid, then press Spirit Shell and unload a ton of damage. This creates a massive absorb shield, ideally before a dangerous burst of damage on nearly the entire raid. The way you plan and build your Discipline Priest revolves completely around creating big spirit shells and almost nothing else. These big spirit shells are commonly referred to as your ramps. Other classes in the game do have similar ramp setups for big healing, but nothing compares to Disc Priest. First, I'm going to talk a bit about setup. Before we even set foot into the raid, we want to have the right conduits, stats, and so on. For stats, you want to mainly focus on haste, with a secondary on item level. Haste allows us to fit more atonements and damage into our Spirit Shell window, which, if you didn't already know, is a majority of our healing in raid. Otherwise, most other stats are pretty good, and you mainly just want to prioritize item level and not worry too much about the rest. The only viable legendary option for raid is Clarity of Mind. For Covenant, I would highly recommend Venthyr, as Mind Games is a large DPS ability we can use to line up with every Spirit Shell. You can make other Covenants work, however for the purposes of this guide I'm going to focus exclusively on Venthyr. If you happen to be a different Covenant, hopefully my reasoning and explanation for my choices will help guide you to the best way to play. The best Soulbind tree is General Draven. However, it isn't the best until you have the entire thing unlocked. While you're leveling up Renown, it seems most priests are preferring Theatar. Getting the mastery bonus during your ramp is a huge increase, and also double endurance conduits is nice for simply just staying alive, since priests can be a bit squishy. The big HPS in your Soulbind trees come from your potency conduits. Exaltation is your best, followed closely by Shining Radiance. Your best trinket by far is Gladiator's Badge from PvP. This is a 1 minute on use that lines up perfectly with your Spirit Shell. You don't need to do much PvP to get one, just work your way up to 1400 and you can buy one and level it up to 213, which should suffice if PvP isn't your thing. For your second trinket, you just want a passive stat bonus, either Kabbalist from the last boss or maybe Changeling or whatever good item level trinket will give you stats. Lastly, this is the talent setup. For the most part, you aren't doing any modifications from boss to boss. You can run whatever you want in the second and the fourth row. It doesn't change too much if you think one is better than the other for a specific fight. I would simply just consult Warcraft logs and see if what you want to try is a viable option. But when you're just learning, there isn't too much to worry about here. Now that you're all set up, it's time to learn how to ramp. Before you set foot into raid, you should go to your Covenant Hall or wherever you can find a target dummy and get your ramp down pat. Your rotation during your ramp is absolutely crucial, and nothing you do in raid matters if you don't know how to do it properly. There are some slight variations, but whatever you decide to go with, you should be able to do it without thinking about it. First, you apply atonements manually, either through Power Word Shield or Shadow Mend. For damage targets, Shadow Mend is the most mana efficient healing, but if they are near full health, you should use Power Word Shield to apply the atonements instead. For starters, I would recommend 4 or 5 individual atonements, and then as you get more experience and more haste, you can increase that number slightly. Then you want to use Radiance, reapply Purge the Wicked, and then use your second Radiance. You refresh the dot in between the Radiance to give it time to travel so you know where the first Radiance is going and you don't overlap atonements with the second one. By this time is when you should have at least 14 or 15 atonements up. It's a good idea to have a week aura tracking your total atonements active to make sure you're doing things right. This is when you press Spirit Shell, any good unused trinket you have, and activate Mindbender. Remember that Spirit Shell and Trinkets are not on the GCD, so you can macro all of these things together in one button if you want. Then you unload your full DPS rotation, Schism, Mind Games, Penance, Mind Blast, and then continue spamming Smite until your Spirit Shell and Atonements run out. That's all there is to it. If you can do this every minute, you've basically become a Master Disc Priest. You don't just want to AFK in between your Spirit Shells though, you can actually contribute some stuff. Because the cooldown of Radiance and Schism is short, you can do one mini ramp in between your Spirit Shells. Apply 0 to 4 Atonements, followed by Radiance. Then press Schism and whatever damage buttons you have available, just not your Mind Games. The amount of Atonements you put up here depends on how much damage your party is taking and how much mana you have available. If your party does need big healing, you can put out a lot of extra Atonements during these ramps, but if you try and do that every time, you're going to run out of mana in a long fight. Outside of your ramps, you should be doing basically 0 spot healing. If you're just randomly throwing out Shadowlands and Atonements, you're very likely to run out of mana. You should only be spot healing if you think that person that you're casting on is going to die if you don't. You're mainly just spamming Smite and Penance while you wait for your ramps to come back up. If you have the spare mana, you can atone the tank or maybe targets with debuffs that need healing, but only if you have the extra mana. I'm not going to go in depth for every single priest utility spell, but I'll cover a few important things that I've learned. Barrier is your big raid-wide damage reduction, however the range isn't very big. One thing I like to do is announce in Discord, group up for Barrier a few seconds before I put it down, to remind people to huddle together for max value. Pain Suppression is your single target DR, generally safe for when the tank asks for it. As you get more experience with the bosses, you can start using it more freely if your team isn't asking for it. Power Infusion is a really strong cooldown. In a pinch, you can use it on yourself to build a really big ramp, but generally you should be using it on the DPS. I generally try and bribe the Boomkin to trade Power Infusion for Innervate, but if that doesn't work, you can get a weak aura that tracks cooldowns for when you should use it. You can also just PM the highest DPS person in your raid and ask what times they want it. The important thing with Power Infusion is that you're using it early and often. As a priest, your defensives are pretty bad, so you should keep yourself in very high priority when healing. When you're ramping, always make sure to hit yourself with one of your atonements, and always be ready to use your health stone and health potion. Don't get caught saving other people's lives. The most important thing is that you keep yourself alive. You're the most vulnerable during your ramp. You're focusing on your rotation while also casting spells where you don't want to move. Get to the point where you have your ramp mastered where you don't even have to look at your abilities or think while you're doing it. That way you can completely focus on your character in case you have to move quickly. Lastly, I want to cover when you should be ramping. In a very organized setting, you're likely to be assigned specific ramp timings. But for now, let's assume you're either slumming it in pugs or in a less organized guild. You want to start setting up around 25 seconds before big damage. The best way to see this is using Warcraft logs, going to the damage taken chart. You can specifically see where the highest damage moments are and plan for them. What I did was put up a ramp for the very first high damage moment and then ramp on cooldown from there. This will actually get you pretty solid HPS without having to do too much homework. If you're stuck on a fight, either can't kill it or trying to get a good parse, you can further review the logs to see if any of your ramps are being missed. If you see that you did a ramp properly but your HPS didn't spike because, well, your team didn't take damage, then you can adjust it slightly until it's lining up better. I wouldn't overthink this part too much though, and it only comes once you've mastered everything else and getting every single ramp perfect. Lining up the first ramp and then ramping on CD will easily take you through normal and heroic raids. That covers most of what I wanted to go over about Disc Priest. It's a very complex class and I could spend a long time talking about different topics. The goal of this video was just to give you an understanding of what you should be doing and help you progress through the raid if you're learning the spec. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more informational WoW content for Raid and Mythic Plus. Thanks for watching, and happy raiding.